So we've got a bowl of cherries this week, which is an interesting one to do. It is an interesting one just because of the vast difference in colour with cherries. Um, and once what I would say is it's a really good chance to be like look at in an observational way and really kind of look into the different shades you see within those cherries. Because on first glance, you think, oh, yeah, it's just dark. But when you start to look at all the different tones in there, it's really quite fascinating. And you think, oh, I've never even seen that. Um, and obviously, they're very different. So we've got the really red ones, kind of like almost a bit of a brown tone in these. And, you've got all these burgundies and the rich violets and all sorts. But I think what's really lovely about doing this in pastels is that we often know anyway that we don't always have the exact tone, which is what we probably discovered last week. We don't always have the exact tone. Like it's not like mixing paint where you go, yes, I know I can put these three together, because we don't tend to do that with the pastels anyway. So we are braver with our, I'm just moving mine down a little bit. We tend to be braver with our choice of colours. So I would say, because we're trying to go for best fit, you may not end up with the same tone at all. So just go with it is what my advice would be today. And just kind of see what you can put together. I've gone for a darker blue surface to let some of the shadow come through, but you don't have to. It's entirely you what you want to do. Because it's a still life, one of the really handy things of doing with a still life actually is, let's have a little look. It's just making sure we can get it all in. Now, you can go down the route I've taken before, where you kind of put a 4/4 grid in, and the same on your paper, and then you know exactly kind of how to place everything. But something I kind of prefer to do generally with still life, unless it's like got so many different things in, I think this is more straightforward, is just to look and think, okay, it's more or less takes up a half of the paper, and I've got like a quarter or something each side about. And what I tend to do is when I'm popping in the details, I just would like to make sure I've got the very outer marks. I'm not even drawing those in yet. I'm just going to do the outer where I think they come to the outer. So obviously, I'm looking whereabouts it is, because that's helpful. I'm kind of come to just below halfway, maybe. So all I'm doing is just starting with just popping a little mark. Now, if you go just one or two tones lighter or darker than your pastel paper, then that makes it quite easy to just rub it out. I mean, obviously I've gone in with a bright colour, otherwise you're not going to see what I'm doing at all. So that's absolutely fine for demonstrating. But yeah, if you're doing it on your own paper, if you go just one or two shades lighter or darker, then you can kind of just get it kind of rubbed out. So I'm just going to just more or less put just where the outer edges are. And the reason I'm doing that is just to get a general idea of where the how to fit the composition in. And again, the top one. So top one, I'm wanting to get the highest bit up here. And again, we can shift things around. If you do it nice and lightly, you can kind of move things around as well. It just gives us an idea and make sure we're going to get the edges in. Because sometimes I've known where people started to kind of put one in and then they go across and then they're like, oh no, it just doesn't fit. So at least if you've got a general idea, we're already starting to shift things around in our mind now. Well, how does it kind of fit together? I'm also going to put the rim just temporarily in. And a little tip for that is, because we're dealing with an ellipsis, which is just basically a curve, sometimes we don't know how deep that is. Sometimes you get a really deep curve, really deep ellipsis, and other times you don't. But once you start to use them, because obviously they're on anything to do with plates, glasses, well, anything, isn't it, with a curve, really, like vases, all those kinds of things. I always put a line right across, so I just pop a bit of paper right across, and then I can see, oh, it's got quite a shallow ellipsis, this. Just kind of comes down a little bit. And you can even do that on your paper like that, and just help you kind of just look at where it might come in the middle. get that in, and then you can join these two together a little bit. So that's quite a handy way of being able to attempt that. It's like get your outer ones in. And you know what, if it's not perfect, that's fine. We can just adjust it as we go anyway. And it's just thinking about little things we can do there. So I've kind of got that edge in. I'm not going to draw too much in here just because, again, I'm going to try and work top down because I'm going to end up taking all this off with my hand. That's just me. Now, what some people can avoid that, that's fine. I personally can't. So I always find it easy to get the kind of background and everything in first. But we're like looking again at the kind of curve in here. I'm just going to put a general idea. It comes in and then comes down. It's really interesting, this pot again. And then the ellipsis again here on the bottom. Often it mirrors the top, but it depends on what angle we actually see. Plain bit there, makes it easy to see. Yeah, it's a similar ellipsis, isn't it? Obviously, it's a narrower, you know, it's a narrower curve here. We've got that coming out. So if I'm going to do the same here, just pop this there. And then that again, will give me a bit of an idea of how that joins up. And I'll work a little bit more in a bit more detail on that anyway. I'm kind of looking here, it kind of comes in the side there. It's a bit of a bulge on this side as well. So it's just starting to get us to give us some ideas about how that goes in. But we can do that a lot with the shading anyway. And then there's some little feet there, which are all kind of glistening, aren't they? It's catching the light on that with that gold. So I've got some little tips for how we kind of get some of those, what appears to be a goldish colour on as well, because people often ask, how do you get metallics with ordinary colours? So I've got some things I can show you with that as well. That's just a little bit helpful. Yeah, and then you've obviously got quite reflections and things on the countertop, which is really nice as well. So just, as I said, just a few bits in here for now, like that. And then we've got, you know, we've just got the other things to fit in, haven't we? So when we come back to this is obviously we're like looking at how things are stacked up. I tend to go, I'm looking at the outside edges, but what I want to start with is anything that's quite big and central, and then I tend to fit things in around. But because we've already got this here, we're not having to think about where the outside edges might be. I mean, this might come out just slightly further, to be fair. Oh, this might come in a bit further, probably in a bit further there. But yeah, so I kind of, we know we've got a cherry and there's similar sizes because the way it's been taken almost at eye level, hasn't it? That not being taken too far over the top. So I'm thinking about, you know, placing whereabouts and how big these cherries are going to be when we're scaling them up. So if I can get those two into place, I've got that big, we've also got this big leaf, haven't we, as well? So we've got one way you can do it is so because I'm working on a dark background, it's a bit more difficult to put them in, but you can do. I could go in with an even darker colour if I want to actually. But what you can do is use something called like the negative space to actually get the shape. So sometimes people find it harder to draw the actual shapes. And so what you can do, I'm just looking for a suitable colour actually on there. I want to go on even darker. I'm going with this brown, is to actually start to draw the negative spaces, which are like the shadows in first, to actually get the shape of the cherry. So because it's dark anyway, that will be fine. So if I came down here, for example, I can start to get a lot of this kind of area in here. And I may even go over with another colour. So what I'm actually going to be doing is getting the shape where I can see the shadow in here. I'm kind of getting these darker colours in between it, and it's really useful actually for finding actually what the what the shapes are. And the more you put all the negative spaces in, those really dark shadows in there, the more the shape will appear. So if I even like look at that shape the negative space between that one. I'm kind of, that's helping me see a little bit better. And then there's a little bit of the negative space between these two here. So can you see, because I'm putting in the shadows, it's starting to appear. The shape of these two cherries here are starting to appear. And we can just kind of get that through there. If you find that's really difficult and you find it better to see the shapes the other way by drawing them in, absolutely, that's not a problem. I tend to use this a little bit more, this kind of way of doing things, when you have quite a lot of similar shapes together, like we did it once with pebbles. It just kind of gives you a little bit, there's a lot, sometimes so much going on, you think, where do I start if I start with one? Well, if you start with the negative spaces, it's a little bit easier. So what I am going to do is from here, I'm just going to kind of get this space in around where these leaves are as well. So I am actually going to draw in a couple of those bits wet around the leaves, so I can see there. I've got to draw the leaf. Now I'm getting the shape. I'm going to draw the leaf between it, coming out over the top of this cherry. It starts to become a little bit more obvious as to what's happening, doesn't it? So this one comes over the side here, and then right over the side of the bowl. But yeah, just have a really good look at what you can see. And this one is kind of coming around the edge of here. Over the top. So I'm just kind of getting it in. I'm not making it perfect yet. And this is what we're saying about moving. It might be you shift your ellipsis or whatever a little bit. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to move my ellipsis down a little bit and get this thing. So I feel like the leaf's actually in the right place now, as opposed to not. So, we're starting to kind of see now more of those spaces. So I've started it off with a brown, but I would actually go in with the darkest colour I can find, because it's so dark in there. And I don't often use black in things, but I actually am going to today for this, between these spaces. We're getting those nicely fixed into place as well before we kind of, to make sure everything's where we want it to be. So again, even here, you see, even on there, we can see that shape coming in. And this one in here. So again, that then is going to create this little shape in here. And then again, you have a little look at the shadow between there, that negative space. And again, we're starting then to see a bit of a shape of a bit of a cherry in there. Just slowly by slowly, these little, all of our shapes pop out. So I'm looking above this bit as well. So we're getting a bit of a negative shape in there as well. It's amazing how you can start to see it once you start looking. We're not used to looking at the shadows, that's the thing. We're used to looking at the shapes. But it is a great way to draw things in. So because I'm kind of getting some of these shapes in, what I am going to do here is start to draw this particular cherry in here. So I'm now continuing to follow that shadow side around, even though it's not quite as dark as the actual deeper bits here. And this is where I'll shift what I've already drawn just a little bit, which is great. It's better that we shift and change than sticking with something. That's the thing with art. We can always move things. It's always a good idea just to act on it and get it moved. That was our kind of a first line there. And then again, there's quite a lot of dark negative space behind the shadow behind this cherry as well. So we're starting to get in, quite a few little bits now, aren't we? Just by looking at those shapes. So again here, let's see. There we go. So I'm going to come back down this side now and make sure I get this cherry, these two in before I put the one balancing on the top, because it needs to sit on somewhere and sometimes you can't always see it. And it's very dark in this area, isn't it? So can't really see a lot of it. And if you can't see a lot of it because it's in the shadow, pop it in the shadow. This particular one that I'm demonstrating here is what I would say is quite a traditional style of, colours that, like, you would you'd see that kind of arrangement in like the old masters with very dark backgrounds and building up those colours to make kind of quite rich and velvety. So I thought that would be nice to do that today, because I often do brighter ones, demonstrate the brighter ones. So it's a little nod to the older masters and how they did this, because it does look fabulous when you're building up the colour on a dark background. It does actually look really nice. It's nice to challenge ourselves with different compositions, really. So again, I'm kind of working back in here. I'm going in with that shadow between where the leaf is as well. I'm looking carefully at what you can see. It's really quite dark, and we can always pop more in again, but I'm just getting a kind of a general feel as to where they are. I'm going to go in with a bit of a darker one between here where I've been working. I was just using a pastel pencil there, but you can just use the edge of a pastel as well, of course. Yeah, it's much less overwhelming sometimes to get those shadows in once you start to really see them. So again, there's a colour down here. There's a cherry down here. It's very dark in there. There's maybe a bit of green or something in it, but I'm just going to focus on this first. That we can't really see too much. We kind of get just the lightness off there, don't we? And then there is a bit of darkness in there as well. We're just exploring that. And then taking this shape around, and again, there's still quite a dark shadow on that. So I'm using that to kind of create the shape of this cherry here. Still see it kind of coming down the other side. I don't know, actually, it might even be a little bit of a drip of dew or something like that on there. I'm not sure. So yeah, we're starting to take shape here. I'm going back to here now just to see what's going on, and I'm comparing these three and thinking, have I done this one big enough? And I don't think I have. So I'm just going to, is it level? So if you're not sure, you can always kind of take a line across, and I think no, it is actually lower, so that's fine. Sometimes it's a trick of the eye. You have to double check, fact check these things, because sometimes things do look smaller and bigger and you're not, can't altogether tell. But that is, if you bring that across there, it's lower. At the top of that cherry, there is a gap down there. So we can just do little things like that just to check it. And then I'm going to bring this one in between now. See if there's anything else I need to pop on between these two colours. Of where else are the shadows? There's quite a big shadow on that side, actually. Between, often where you've get between fruit as well, you do get those shadows. So there's quite a lot of shadow when the fruit is like kind of squashed up together like that. This has got a bit of a curve on the top, so we can also observe all these lovely little shapes that you get and everything. But don't worry, like, again, we're just starting to get this out, but what we can actually do is change the shape as we go as well, just by adapting things as we go. And bringing a different shape in there, a different colour, etc. There we go, and there's all this lovely dip here. So often we get the shadows in the dip. So if you want to pop those shadows on, you might want to be putting the shadows on with a different colour, by the way. You don't have to just, I'm sticking with this colour because I particularly know that my set doesn't have a very, very, as dark as I'd want, so I'm going a bit darker. with this one, but I will also put some other colours over the top of that as well. Yeah, if you have any kind of if this shade, if this shade here is as dark as you want to go, then it's just following it through with the other colours. That's what I'm trying to do here. And then we'll build up these cherries with all the fabulous, all the shadows, the warmer colours, the pops of colour, and then finally with those highlights on top. So it kind of gets a picture together. So just by doing that, we've had a really good think, haven't we, about what we can do. So I'm now just looking at what shadow goes between here as well, how this cherry comes over. If I want it to come, how far I want it to come over, it kind of only just touches there. Yeah, you can shift things up if they don't quite. See, that's where I put that mark, which is, again, we're just shifting and changing that as we go. But it's a little bit more, I'm not, there isn't a big shadow there, but I'm just kind of getting in, because now I can see the rest of that shape. I'm just popping that in there. It's a bit darker under here between, but not a huge shadow again. And as we're doing this as well, we can also see, some of these fabulous colours. And how the light's coming, where that light source is coming, which we'll talk about in a bit. So yeah, so what I am doing is just giving it a bit of a fix in there, the colours that we've got so far. And obviously, if you're working quite small, you just need to be a bit mindful of kind of spreading it out too much, but just kind of getting some colours fixed in there. Actually, it's quite dark between there as well. And then we're working our way across, aren't we, really? I've not put any of the tops in yet, because once I've got this, I'm going to just get a little bit of that background in before I put any of the stalks. The stalks up for me are the last thing, because I want to make sure I've got everything in the right place first before. So we're here. So there's this last one here, which looks now, when we're looking, let's have a look. There's a massive kind of green, all sorts of things going on in here, like a little bit of a cherry there. And then just looking again at this negative space here, but actually I'm going to bring my bowl a bit nearer as well. Here. It's kind of got a bit of the edge is a bit more curved there. So again, just looking at where there's obviously a flat stalk coming out there. You can also see some of the dark patches there. I'm not going to an ordinary pastel in here, because I can always pop those green bits in afterwards. Let's get those shadows in. But you don't have to go, as I said, you can go a much lighter shade if you want them black. For some people it's too much, but I quite like when we've got such a dark tones across this composition. I quite like it. So there we go. Just bringing that all the way across now, because I'm focused on that as well. There's a little bit of the lip of the of here. I've got that coming out to the side. So again, still looking, still kind of watching how this where this cherry goes here. And it kind of like the little stalks and things kind of blocking the view, isn't there really? But we can get in the shadow of this one on there. It kind of goes in as well. You see the shape now of that cherry there. And then I'm just going to get the back of this cherry coming round, or it might even be a stalk. It's quite difficult, isn't it, to see that one? But this is where we just kind of, our brain, we just got to kind of make the work out the gaps really. And any other shadow areas that we've got in there. Yeah, what's going on there? So whilst I'm looking and focusing on the shape of this little bowl, start to pop a few details in. There we go. So yeah, we're pretty much getting a lot of these shapes just from those negative spaces, which is really handy. And once you start and you kind of work your way around one particular item, you know, whether it's stones or cherries or even strawberries or something else, you can, you know, or a fruit bowl full of fruit, you then start to can see the shapes transforming as you go. So that's really nice to be able to do that. So before I even start kind of doing my cherries, just decide whether you want to put any background in. I'm using this blue background because I like it, the colour I've chosen, but if I wanted to put anything a little bit mottled in there, I could do. Let's see. There's because it's quite dark, it's quite nice to have a bit of, what could I use on there? I quite like almost kind of some browny colours on there. I've got this brown here already, I might just use a bit of that, or even a bit of a purpley colour. I'm just going with that. So all I'm doing with this background is just looking for a start where the edge of the table is. About here. And again, it's really because it's mottled, you can't actually see it that well. It's not a perfectly straight line, so it doesn't matter if it's not as well. It's almost like there's a tone on there, like they're getting a shadow cast on here, or it's just in with the wallpaper. It's kind of get those different lines, don't you, in there? So I'm just kind of popping that in. And then behind it, you know, I'm not going to do too much. The reason being, I don't want it to take away too much from the cherries. So I'm just really kind of lightly getting it in. The reason I'm popping something on now is that I don't want to disturb my cherries once I get going. But if you feel like it's distracting and you just don't like that kind of like that in your composition, then just leave it. You can see in here, like you can see the texture of my paper is quite thick there. And I don't mind that at all. Kind of using that just to get a little bit of the interest on the background. But some people don't like having that texture coming through. And if you don't, all you need to do with that is just put more on. Load up more, look. And then it'll just cover and you end up with a thicker amount really. I'm just getting that on, kind of just a few blobs. Get some down here, so I might add, I may decide as I'm going through to add a little bit more into the background, but I'll see. Sometimes I don't do too much into the background till the end, just because you can then get to see you get to see how, what colours and things you've got in the foreground, and sometimes you want to weave a few of those in. So there's no issue to kind of come back and decide what's happening first. I'm just getting them in, as I said, because if anything comes into where the cherries are, that's a bit behind here, a bit pattern. So it is an interesting paper. It kind of really sets the tone, doesn't it, for the artwork. Doing some quite dark blobs in there. Yeah, I'm going to come back to that and decide how much I want to do once I've done it, as long as it's not creating any issues for me here where these cherries are going, then that's absolutely fine. Take a little pause and see how everybody's getting on with the shape. Okay, so having a think now about the different colours that we can use on here. So I think really it depends on your set is the biggest thing really. What we're looking at is all it are the tones, the different kinds of tones we can see in the cherry. So even with the really dark cherries, you'll notice that you'll get some different there's the shadows that make it the flat, things a little bit flatter. Then we've got we'll have like a kind of a what I'd say is a mid-tone, what the general colour of the cherry is all around. And then we've got depending on where the light is and where it's been highlighted. So we get these other warmer colours. So if you have a look on here for this one, when you really start to look, you're thinking, oh, is it orangey? Is it red? Is it pink? Is it purple? Is it got a bit of a yellow tone in there, peachy tone? And that's where we start to really kind of explore the colours that we would never normally explore, because of course, as well with the pastels, we might not have everything. So I think what the good thing to do is to try some colours. So, you can try for any, if you have got purples in your set, try those. We can layer up as well. You can even try reds. Just try them out, and have a little look together. What does that do? Or mix up some colours as well. So what else have I got here? I've got this one. That's quite a bright one. But we can almost layer that one up with, say, a red. So we can't mix it on the actual pad, but we can put a couple of layers down. You could even explore what happens if you did like a pinky one. Like I'd probably put the blue down first, actually. I mean, my background's blue anyway, so it's not going to make too much change, but you can almost explore trying like a blue and then a purple brushed carefully, rather than mixing it too much to get a darker colour, deeper colour if you haven't got one. You could even try brown colour fixed in first. You want to fix those colours in. And then what else have we got here? A purple over the top. And again, I'm trying to keep my colours so they're not mixing and just going a muddy colour. So, just putting plenty on. So we've got varying colours. We can put one down first, or you can just go in entirely with one colour. And as I said, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as what you've already got there at all. You can then obviously, if you're needing to put any shadow, I mean, we've started to put some shadows, but it might be that you need to work in a little bit more shadow as you go. That's fine. But then the other colours I'm trying to think about are any that I can see that are highlights that we build up with. So I'm going to take this little one here, which is violety one, like a lilac one, a pink. So that's what I'm seeing in the middle here on the highlights. That's as we build up. And also I feel like I'm getting some orangey or reddy colours in there, but that's just me. So again, it just depends entirely on what you're seeing. So what I'm doing here is I'm just exploring a palette that I can put together. So when you think you've got kind of a mid-tone in there, I'd start with one. The other side of it to think about is, do you want to work through all your shadows first, or do you want to work through and do the whole cherry from start to finish? That's entirely up to you. Some people like to kind of get everything set in, then start building up the top layer. If you're feeling tired, which a lot of people seem to be feeling at the moment because we're kind of coming out of winter, then um, you know, go for get get these layers built up and do one whole cherry first, so you can see that there's going to be some success there. When we're tired, we sometimes need a little bit of a um, you know, an incentive in a way to think, oh, it's going to be okay. So it's like a marathon training, isn't it? When people are building up the program so they keep, it's a bit of a long way. I'm not saying this is going to like a marathon, but it's just like one of those little tricks. Sometimes if you're feeling tired, get one done, then you can, then you can see and then you can build on with it. So any of those ways is fine. I'm going to go in with some colours and just to kind of have a little look and go. I'm going to go in kind of more of this one, I think, here. And just do one at a time and then build on from there. So I'm going to start. It's entirely up to you where you start. Because I'm a left-handed, I try and start over on the right-hand side so I can work this way and don't smudge my own work. Because sometimes if I'm working from there to there, and the same if you're right-handed, you might want to start and work backwards so you're not kind of keep going back over the top of it. But again, it's entirely up to you. Just go with what you think. So I'm going to just get these two colours, remind myself what I was going to use. The other thing, of course, is the other thing to think about is where the light source is coming. You can see it. It's coming from this side, isn't it? Over here. Because these are lit up. This is where all of the highlights are coming on that side of the cherries. So, some are going to be more clearly, that one's more clearly in the light. The ones at the bottom underneath are very dark because they're so far out the light. So that helps us kind of build a picture up as well. So I'm just going to go back over to this side. I'll have another little look at what colour these cherries were because I've mixed my colours now. I can't quite remember what I got. So I think that one and that one. No, it was a blue one and that one, wasn't it? Yeah, so it's another red. I think it's those two. So let's try that again. I think it's those. Yeah, so that's ones I'm going to go for. But you might prefer to go, one that's a little bit more kind of on the ready side. It's entirely up to you. It depends how you feel, really. So I'm just going to go in here. I am going in pretty much with the same colour underneath. I mean, I've got a blue background, as I said, so this will just kind of add to it. I'm just careful not to go where the edges of me, of my line are there. No. I am just going to kind of get a little bit more shadow in the bottom here. And this is where you could even go in if you wanted to go in with your black. What I'm doing here, I'm not going to go in with pure black because it is much darker than the colours I've got. But I'm going to add some brown into that because it will just make it a bit softer. It's not going to be too hard because we know that down in the real shadows we've got this very dark colour, but it's still quite dark. So I'm going to go over all of that with this other colour. But what I'm doing for subsequent layers, if you remember from last week, it's just tapping the colour on top, but we've put quite a lot on is the biggest difference there. We've added more onto this layer so that we're not disturbing the underlayer too much. We just press that in. So we're starting to build up, starting to build up the layers there. And again, this is where I was saying, actually, what I might do is darken it this way a little bit. So I'm going to go in with my pencil. There's slightly softer colours underneath. I'm going to only put a small amount. And this is where, it's totally natural to want to go back and kind of create a bit more shadow in there. But I'm doing that before I get to the top layers, really, so that it's not going to, we're not going to have too much of that going on when we've got these light and bright bits going in there. And we've started to pop it in, haven't we, in the shadows, but it may be you just want to pop that on as well on the top. So I'm just blowing off that chalk dust. And then, and then what we're going to start to do is to build up any other colours we can see in there as well. I'm just going to bring that in a bit again. Yeah, if you want to keep these colours fresh, it's minimal disruption to the underlayers really. And then I'm looking on here, it's almost, and this is what I was seeing it earlier, it's almost like, to me, that's a bit pastel-y, a bit violet in colour, but you might be seeing something totally different. You can go in with, some people see yellow, so I'm just going to get that in. And again, putting enough pressure on And I'm just going to, because you get all sorts of shapes in these cherries, really the reflections sometimes of windows or whatever artifacts next to it. And I'm seeing it kind of go over here as well. I don't know why, but I am. I'm making a shape around there. And that almost feels a little bit slightly warmer, slightly more peachy in colour or yellowy. Not sure which one. I'll try that one. So again, I'm just, we can only go in with what the eye sees, because again, it's our representation of what we can see, and I'm tapping that. So with that one, I feel like I'm nearly there. I'm just going to literally go in with the top layer. So this is where I am going to be careful, because my hands, because it's a dark piece, my hands are going to be very dark, very covered in dark pastel, and we don't want it to spoil. Make sure your fingers are nice and dry as well when you tap that in. So you can go in with a white if you feel it's white, or if you don't feel, if it feels too harsh, you can go in with like a very light colour but not white. I quite like a strong contrast, so I'm going to go in with this. And really all I'm doing is creating that shadow, like that shape, really pressing on there. Sometimes you get like a little bit of a stretched shape. Sometimes they're quite angular, so just see what shape you can see. You can always practice on a bit of paper if you feel you want to do that as well. And sometimes it's the reflection of the lights as well. Like where someone's got the lights, it looks like there's three there. Could be like overhead lights where there's three somewhere. And that's it. So that's that one almost, I think, complete. I might just put a little bit of depth back in the middle. There we go. And then we're just going to build on that, and then go on to your next one. So we just building up, building up, building up really with each of those. Now, when you get the first one in, it won't really make an impact, but at least you can see, you know what, that's going to look like a cherry when it's finished. So what will happen is our brain likes to see symmetry, likes to see things finished. We'll get kind of a little bit of um, there'll be some hope in there because that has finished a bit. But it'll take three or four of these cherries until our brain starts to make the link and the pattern between it, and not really fully until the stalks are in. So yeah, so happy. Enjoy going through those with those different tones and things like that. You also get like this darker areas between the cherries. Where the cherries overlap and that one casts a shadow over the other one. So I might pop those in now. I'm thinking about shadows again as well, and making sure I've got them on the actual cherries as well. And then yeah, so we're just beginning this process of working through, layering up, remembering how to get the best of the colours by, more layers, lighter touch, plenty on. Bring back any shadows. squeaky. And just building those up. Not worrying too much. We're just trying to kind of get a representation with some colours with what we have. But yeah, you can explore with some, you can even go in with some reds if you want. Just see, you know, it might be different areas of different cherries, whether they're in the light or not. Because again, this one's quite low down, but some of these are a bit higher. You may end up with some reds and all sorts of interesting colours on there. Just explore what you can see. Because it's your representation of what you're seeing, you can have exactly what you want on there. You know, if you've got some wiggly marks or whatever it is you can see on there, just pop those on. That's the beauty of colour as well. So you're just working them up, working them on until you get to the highlight, and then whatever shape you see, don't be frightened to just mimic that shape. Even if it looks a bit, you know, kind of higgledy-piggledy, often it is, because that's what's reflected in it. And if it feels too intense, you can always just dab it very slightly and just kind of soften it down a little bit. And I'll take just a very brief pause there just to make sure everybody's okay with colour, but just explore. So we'll just keep working our way through all of these different colours. You know, and I said, you know, as we said, some may be a bit lighter, like this one over here, just depending on where it is in your bowl. Some may be darker because they're underneath leaves, or, you know, or between. Underneath another cherry, that's the one that makes it often darker. And we start to see, interestingly, some repeated shapes and things like that with the little highlights. So that's quite interesting sometimes. So just get all those little shapes that you can see. It's really interesting when you start to look at the highlights and what the. So plenty of pressure for those highlights. And if you do need to just slightly soften, just really tiny dabs just to fix it in a bit. If you feel you've gone in and your shadow's too harsh, you can always soften it down with a bit of a red or a bit of a brown or something like that, so it's not so flat. Sometimes I've seen a problem with like really dark, like black, it can flatten it. So you just warm it back slightly up again. Just remember to blow off any of the excess dust so it doesn't kind of get reworked into your colours where you don't want it. And check your fingers every now and again. And also if your pastels are getting a little bit, starting to pick up a lot of dark or something and you want to keep them a bit cleaner, just give them a little wipe off in a paper towel. And then they're back to how they should be. Or in a separate bit of paper, just kind of like rub it off. You do have to get a little bit like that every now and again. And when you get these really kind of brighter ones here, you can bring in some much warmer colours. You can experiment with some much warmer ones, as a contrast. Just see what happens when you explore them. Again, when you've got pastels, it's an ideal opportunity to, really have a go with some of these colours that you just wouldn't normally use. Interesting. Well, I'm just softening when you get a big patch of light. You might just want to soften it down a little bit. The main thing is really just to enjoy kind of looking at, how these reflections, because they're studying themselves, to be fair. I learned so much just from looking at the how reflections work. They're fascinating, the shapes and everything, because depending on the surface, and obviously the surface of the cherries are so shiny, and it's also the dark colours on them. It behaves in a different way. So like here where you get like a highlight on the very dark, you can make that go in with like a peach colour I've got just like a pinky one there. I'll just use that. So it's not quite as harsh on the light, but I'm just literally kind of wiggling my pastel around to create a shape that I think I can see. And that's kind of it really. Working your way around. I'm only going to pop a little bit of a shadow, very small one around the other side of there. You don't even need to do it in a really dark colour either. You can do it in it could be like a red or a purple colour. So it's not, going to make that too flat where you've got that lovely shine, or a pink or something like that. I'm just being mindful there because it's very dark, just not to kind of rub it in too much. We just got to keep reminding ourselves, really. And it's like anything else, the more we do it, it becomes more like a second nature to not do it. So again, we're just building it up. These lovely colours that we didn't realise till we really started looking were there. So just making some interesting marks. That's all we can do really, is just keep looking at what we think we can see there. And where we're not sure where it feels like, it feels, you know, when you're looking, this feels quite dark and a bit flat here, but it doesn't always make sense to the eye. So I'm just going to pop in a little bit more, just a little bit more warmth because it doesn't feel like it should be that flat, if that makes sense. So if something's not making sense, it might just be the way we're looking at it. You can always alter it slightly, you know, change the shape a bit if it doesn't feel right. That's good. So again, you can use the shadow to kind of just tighten up any lines as well. You know, if you're thinking, well, I'm just gonna put that shadow in and make that a bit more rounded. That's what we do to use it there. And we just keep going with those different shades. We can see even the ones in the bowl where you may only see kind of something poking out. I would do that one underneath these leaves. It's very difficult to see, isn't it, what actually is going on there. So I'm just going to pop the shadow in and kind of see a bit of a shape of something, but the leaves overlap it as well. So we can see something that looks a bit light on the side of that one as well. So it's still catching the light there. We kind of know it's going to be a cherry in there, even if we can't see much of it. So all we can do is put what we think we can see. Again, there's some highlight here, so we know there's probably part of a cherry here underneath, but we can't really see too much in there. So this bit here, which I'm not sure, I'm just going to put kind of a shape of a cherry in, or some of a cherry. Make it really nice and dark in places. And then just pick up on those highlights really that we can see. Just soften that because it's down at the bottom. And something else we can see under a something just in the kind of popping out in the dark there, isn't that its own? And kind of get this last one in again, which is quite shady, quite dark at the end. So we'll have at the moment, and it's always the same, you can't necessarily tell what fruit is because we haven't got, the brain cannot see it can't see stalks, so it doesn't, you know, because most fruit that's round, unless you can see like maybe one where it's going, and it depends on the position, doesn't it, of the cherry and everything. So we just keep going. We need to put shadow back in. Go for it. very difficult to see it anyway, isn't it? What's going on here? And this bottom underneath. And then again, you know, you can tighten up any shadows you want. So again, we're just looking at these colours. Any highlights. Or low lights, you know, if any other little lights or colours or anything in there. There we go. So yeah, so we're kind of where, you know, just keep looking. You know, the leaves, I'm going to make sure my hands are totally clean now because I'm going on to green, and greens are obviously very warm, so we don't want any of these really dark colours mixed in. Keep them fresh as possible. And there are some little darker greens in, but again, it's just testing your pastels to decide which colour you're going to go for. Now, I'm actually going to work the opposite way around this time because there's only a tiny bit of shadow. I'm going to go in with this mid colour. Sometimes it just makes sense if you've only got one small area of another colour to get that in. We just got to be careful. I think as long as we're careful. That's the main thing. You can use your little finger, you could use a cotton board, you could use, you know, a paper blender. Really, that just kind of brings it through so you get like a bit of a neater line. But even using a paper blender is just getting used to how much to rub it, because sometimes it can just come off onto your blender. So you just got to be a bit mindful of not kind of over rubbing it or pressing too hard. You just want a light touch to get into the edges and things so that you feel a bit more comfortable. Now from there, I probably will just get that dark colour of the leaf in there. So, you know, you're just looking for a darker green, really. Just kind of look at, quite often you get a very light area. This is coming up a little bit around the, coming up here. Like that. So I'm just kind of trying to recreate the pattern that you can see really there, just very gently. Just a little bit, don't need to, you know, go into huge amounts of detail, just enough so that you've got a little bit, because there'll be these final pops of colour like the real bright on the outside. Now, I've always, you know, and also the thing is you can go in with a yellow if you feel that's a better thing, is to go over with yellow. So again, as we've discovered, the lights and darks on here and the warms, it sometimes has more impact if you're following that and you're getting that last little line. I'm actually going with a bright yellow. Is where we can use pastels when we've certainly got neutrals and darks to, you know, get that really nice pop of colour in there. Just be very careful not to kind of blend it in too much. Keep colours fresh. And then again, you know, they're not everywhere, so I'll probably switch to a slightly more dull tone of yellow or peach or whatever at this side, because it's more in the shadow. But we still get that edge of the leaf there, we can still see it. And then again in the middle, you know, we're looking at the tones in here. It might just be a bit of a greeny colour that's a bit dullish, Or you can even go in, I think she might be, I think it might. I'm seeing a bit of blue, so or you can go with turquoise or see what you can see, but I think that's quite interesting that. It always is when we start seeing things for the first time, we think, oh, is that a bit of turquoise in there? You can see, if you think it is, put it in. It's what makes your artwork totally unique to anybody else, is the colours that you see in it. Okay, so it's getting a bit darker in there, so then I probably would, you know, go with dark green or a brown or whatever it is you can see. Getting a bit darker in that middle bit. You can do the shadow around it again, tighten that up so that it becomes a bit clearer if you want. That's the other way of doing it. And then obviously this leaf curling back. So again, we've got quite a few colours in there. And it comes round and round, doesn't it, like that? So it's almost like that. And then it curls round like that and up. With leaves, it's just kind of working out which way the turns are, and that's it. Not anything more complex than it needs to be at all. And again, we're just looking at how to recreate these colours, really. Get your shadow ones in. And any brights that you're popping on there. So I'm just using the edge of the pastel. I'm not going to make that really ultra kind of neat, because unless you've done ultra tight cherries, then if you have done loose cherries, I've done quite loose ones, you know, kind of like nothing's really perfect lines or anything. If I went and did these really tight and really perfect, then it wouldn't be in keeping with my picture, if that makes sense. I'm trying to keep a little bit of this style through there, so don't be worried if you think it's not, you know, it's not highly totally like botanical drawing. Well, you know, I would hope not really, because we're not doing a botanical drawing, doing a pastel work. So again, there's now some nice different colours in there. I'm just going in as before, bringing in, just getting this main bit down, and I'll work into the leaves, because as long as I'm not mixing it up with the rest, it'll be okay. And this is where you can, you know, you can adapt things. So I didn't make my leaf, this leaf, quite as wide. Now widen it over the top of that on there, and putting plenty of pastel on when I kind of mix it carefully. There's plenty to move about. Again, we're looking at shadows between the leaves. Always get shadows between sets of leaves there. And it comes round in a shadow here. So just trying to pop in a few little contrasting greens. All about contrast really anyway. Why things pop out a bit more when we, yes, we see the shape and everything, and we get that lovely contrast between the colours. And actually, once we get the bowl in and everything, we don't really focus on those leaves. It's only whilst we're doing them. That's what I always say. We get very fixated on the bit we're doing, which is great. It's great to really observe, but don't be frightened to just leave it. And you can always come back to it a little bit later if you're not sure whether you're happy with it, because it will change again. I'm not popping in with a dark colour. And again, if you want to kind of go in and get some of those shadows in, put back a bit, then by all means do that. And again, if you've got any pops of colour you want to add with a, then that's a good time. Sometimes when you're putting a pencil on, it's not quite as soft maybe as your pastel, so you might just need to be just carefully using the edge of your pastel. Often the pencils are a little bit more compacted. Oops, Daisy, I've gone right in there, look, with that, with that colour. Didn't mean to, that was just because I was laughing. So this is the beauty, isn't it, pastel? So I'd gone out with the thing, so I'm just blending that bit in with the dark there. And I'll just pop a little bit more shadow over the top there. Slowly. Pop that back in. Anything on here? Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to get between that with my shadow. I'll put the shadow back in between the leaves. Because we're doing it carefully, it's easier to do. So there we go. Come back to here again. See if I can get it in the right place this time. There we go. When you know when we're starting to get tired. So really, probably because I'm on greens, I'd start to put the stalks in a little bit over the top now, just make it feel like. Now, the key with this is to have a little practice with the edge of your pastel. If you're not using a pencil and you're using the edge, just to get some straight lines. I did this morning and put big, thick line up like that. You almost want to use the edge and the side nice and finely, not that way, which is what I did this morning. I thought, oh, crikey. But have a little play with that. And again, the stalks are very different in colour. You know, look how dark that one is with a little bit of highlights. It's in the shadow compared to that one and the one behind it. So I'm going to go in with a brighter one on this. Decide how far out this one comes here. I might even trace my way back with it. Can't, yeah, it almost goes over the top as well. So I'm just going to go like that for the moment. Just I've got plenty of pastel on it, but I'm just very carefully going to kind of fix it. Okay. And I'm looking at the colours in there. It feels a bit yellowy at the end there. So I'm just going to add just a tad of that. If you see any colours, I'll pop them on. Down here, I can see some slightly darker colours, so I'm going to get those in as well. Even these have got some highlights and lowlights, haven't they? And then there's a little bit of a tip there, deciding which colour, whether it's the pastel or not. And I'm going to go in with a bit of this, it's probably a bit like that, a bit of a browny colour. Oops. And again, it's just a suggestion. Or I might go a bit darker actually. Just a suggestion that's there. And then you can look at any little highlights that are on it as well. So to me, I can see a few. Now that's the key. Like if you're using the pastels, you just got to be a bit light of touch. Just hold them a bit nearer the bottom, and then you've got a little bit more control over them when you're doing things like that. Right. And then this one here. So just kind of overlapping like that. And that one does go kind of into the centre, doesn't it, where we'd expect it to go. But again, you know, we're looking at the colours. This is much lighter, so I'm going to go over with a light colour in certain bits of it. You know, we expect this side to be highlighted because that's where the light's coming from. So we can use that, you know, kind of knowledge to do that there. I've just gone over a little bit there, but I'm just going to put it out a little bit. I'm going to go in with a pastel. Sometimes because they're softer, they're actually easier to use, even if it's a bit finicky. And I'm kind of just going to create a broken line up there really where I can see that, and then again pop a nice bit of the edge on the top there. I'm going to use the pastel itself again, I think, because my colour isn't quite what I want. Yes, you know, now this is when your mind starts to say, ah, it's cherries. You know, there could have been plums mine quite easily before, but it's a mind thing, definitely. You know, our brains are incredible, really, at giving us the information that we need to help create the rest of that picture. I'm just bringing this again, a bit more of a stalk up here. And again, we can't always see what all of these are. We'll see quite a few things, like there's some crisscrossing under there. We can see a bit of something there. And again, the ones, if you don't want it to be as bright underneath, just blend it out a bit with your finger in there. It'll just be a small, there's a few crisscrossing. There's another one under here. I'm going to go in with a slightly darker one, a little bit more mossy coloured one under there, so it's not quite as. So we can see that in there, just a little bit of it again. And again, our brain works it out when we're looking at it. So there's a bright green one, really vivid green one there. I'll go out with that one, get that one up. I've still got to finish them off a bit, but we're just kind of making it, you know, making it start up that, aren't we? And again, just getting the tips, whatever you can see. That are at the side, you know, again, if it's a different colour, we can literally just put a whole different colour in there. And just a very, like a more dull, rather than putting a white on there, I'm just putting a bit of a more dull colour, whereas it's, but still pick it up. And then from there, we can start to layer in the different shadows of the bowl. So again, I'm going to go in really dark with this one. I want to pop some of this into the background as well. So I'm just going to go in. You see in the middle where underneath the lip, so we get a nice bright bit on the lip here, but under the lip, it starts to, we've got all this like interesting shape, haven't we, where it's, you know, you can see that shadow coming in and out. So let's get that into place. You know, back and forth. Even if you put a bit too much, and it doesn't really matter because we can overlay those other colours, and there's some fabulous colours. So we're kind of trying to create the shape of this in the shadows as we go. It's very shadowy down here, isn't it? I'm going to use some of the bowl as well. So almost all of this is very, very dark. Can't really see it. You can see kind of a bit of texture in there. Getting it fixed in for sure. And you can see that texture on my paper now. We've got a lot less on. But we've got the dark bit in the middle again. And then I'm almost going to say a little bit of this, but I'm going to use kind of more, some more bluey browny tones over this side actually. So it's lovely that we can capture, you know, that shape of that bowl going round. So you kind of, so we're following the ellipsis there to bring it round to kind of create that shape in a way, but dark in the middle. And then just you need to kind of have a look at where your bowls come into. We can soften down the edge as well. I've got a hard edge on it, we'll soften that down. Don't worry too much about the shape. And again, you know, you can always create the shape underneath the bowl by popping in some shadow if you prefer. But again, you know, just check the ellipsis itself by just putting that over. And then you can kind of see the way it goes there. But again, it's very difficult to see what's going on at this side, so I'm just trying to keep that quite soft anyway. And then when we've got the other colours in place as well, that will make a big difference. I'm just going to create a bit more shape in here. Okay. And then again, start to kind of work in some of those mid-tones. You might be using your paper to come through, or you might not, and think about what colours you want to come in there with. You can be really experimental with some really unusual colours, some warms, and some brights. I'm just going to bring some blues in. I don't know why I'm wanting to, but enhance the background a bit there. But this is why it's this bowl's lovely, because you can just bring some different things. It's much warmer over there, but I've got some kind of brights in here. And then other warm colours. But again, so if you wanted to keep these a bit fresh, so you'll need to kind of blend them less in. But yeah, you can go bold. You can go in for bring some of that turquoise in if you want what we're talking about. Whatever colour you fancy in there. You could go for mainly kind of ochre warm colours. So we do need some warmth in it to kind of bring the shape in. So I'm going to bring a slightly warmer one in. What's all yeah. Maybe that one, maybe this one. Yeah. So again, I'm looking at where I can see I'm putting plenty on. So it's not going to, so it's not going to kind of just get into that muddy mess there. I'm looking at where it's getting a bit brighter here. I can go in with a highlight as well, but I kind of want that shape underneath. So we can see, can't we, the texture of the ball. So I'm just tapping that in a bit. But again, we need to build all this up. It's not just going to happen. It's near the end where we go, oh yeah. We're just creating. So there's not a huge amount of warmth on this side. There's just a few little lines. So our brain's having to make up what's going on. And it's not very bright because it's in the shadow. So you can, if you want to kind of take the brightness out of that by you can kind of blend that a little bit if you want to just soften it down a little tad there. You could go in with the brown or something, because that's warmer than the black. It creates a bit of the shadow and shape in the morning in there at the same time. And then go in, finish off with a real pop. So I'm looking on here, and this is a comparison. Is there a white in there or not? And you'll have to just kind of make that decision. I'm going to go in with a pop of this, which is it's a bright peachy colour, not quite white. And then all I'm going to do then is go in the very brightest area with the white. So there we go. Because again, we've got the light source coming around here, haven't we? And then I haven't done the top yet, but I'll do that in a while. So we're following this ellipsis round underneath. On the top of the bowl. Okay. Again, it doesn't need to be, really doesn't need to be perfect. We're just getting a nice hint that it's there, and then I'm going in with a bit of a white just to top up the very very brightest area there. And the same down here. The same here. Same here at the bottom. All this side. You know, and again, you can put feet on it if you want to, or not. If you prefer not to, that's fine. So, you know, so it's really starting to, it's really starting to take shape now. Because I really want to focus on that, I'm not going to do much to my background just because I really enjoy looking at the bowl and the cherries. I'm not going to put the feet on mine. I prefer it, but you can do exactly the same process we've done and just finish off with a bright pot. I'm going to make my background around it really simple because again, I want the bowl and the cherries to sing. So I am actually going to go in with a very dark colour here. Literally just going to just bring that in. That's it. Bring it up. But you know, if you want to make yours more detailed, then absolutely by all means go for it. It's whether you know you want to focus on it as a composition as a whole, or you want to focus on, you know, let them cherries do the talking. That sounds a bit mad, doesn't it? You know, but you know what I mean. So yeah, so just kind of finishing off here. I will put a little bit of like just difference in with this background. I could have just used the blue, of course, to come through, or if you've got a black background or anything like that, you can just use that. Letting the blue come through, let the blue come through a little bit. So there, so yeah, I'm just gonna bring in that darkness as well, just to tighten up my where the shape of the bowl is. Help. And then if you want to, you can, you know, okay, you can, you can't really see, this is quite mixed up, isn't it, really, between that side of the bowl's very dark. You can just kind of bring in a few little highlights or something, or even colour if you don't want to do that. I'm just going to bring in a few bits of colour here. Nothing major, just I don't mind like softening these down. Again, I don't want it to take away from the cherries, but it's enough to show that there's something a little bit light on this surface, whatever it might be. Just going to soften that. Yeah, so I'm not putting anything too light on there really. And that's it, but you don't even need to do that. You can just kind of really work something into the paper. Yeah, and that's where I would just stop on there, and then you know you can always have a little look and see are you happy with the way everything's placed. But yeah, it's just decide. I mean, you can always go back in, as I said, go back into your background, but I think I would leave it and just if you're undecided as well, come back to it the next day, because then you're not going to be making a snap decision on it. You can always add a bit more. Sometimes we're so close to it, and we've been very close to these cherries, haven't we, for a while. But I hope you enjoyed that, and that's been really helpful. And that was my final pause for tonight.